He was outlining the way that Fianna Fáil used to run its business here, and then I woke up and realised, no, he was at the usual rubbish of making ridiculous, unsubstantiated attacks on Sinn Féin and on those people who support us in the north. And I have to commend the Fianna Fáil leader for bringing negative campaigning to almost an art form, even though it's very tedious and boring to hear the same unsubstantiated allegation week after week after week after week.
Please.
Taoisigh, I want to very much welcome your stated commitment to the Norra Water Bridge, which you restated here today, and I would ask you to give some detail of the next phase of this very important and necessary piece of infrastructure. It's of crucial, and it's been talked about and planned and lobbied for and advocated for going back 40 years. But in this modern age, if you just reflect on the fact that that region is only less than an hour from Belfast Airport and from Dublin Airport, and you may also reflect on that when it comes to whatever you're going to do about Aer Lingus. But you can go from the Boyne Valley, from the Neolithic history, right up the east coast, from the Cromwellian town or the Cromwellian time in the walled city of Drogheda, up to Annagassan with the Vikings. You can nod at Queen Maeve and Coholm. You can see across the coulees and up into Slieve Gullion and into the Mournes. And this is an area of hugely important scenic potential and tourist potential. So I would like you, if you would, just to give us some sense of the next step on the long journey to get the bridge built across Norra Water. The questions I have down, I want to just try and concentrate on three of them: the Ballymurphy massacre case, the Pat Finucane case, and the Hooded Men. And you may know that the brother of one of those killed in the Ballymurphy massacre, a man called John Lobbery, you might know that his brother Terry had his conviction for riotous behaviour squashed just 2 weeks ago. And in August 1971, Terry was only a young guy at the time. He was detained, he was stripped, he was beaten, he was made to run barefoot over broken glass and through a gauntlet of British Army soldiers. He was told by one soldier that he had already killed one Irish bastard and another one wouldn't matter, and this soldier, according to Terry, put his weapon to Terry's head and pulled the trigger. What he didn't tell him was that the other Irish bastard was his brother. Now, this man has lived with this for the last 40 years. The quashing of his conviction, it's an important development. It adds weight to the demand that this case needs to be properly investigated. I also want to, just for the record, extend my condolences and sympathy to Terry. His wife Lily just died at the weekend, and she too has lived through all of these times and has campaigned for justice for those killed in Ballymurphy. Now, Taoisigh, last year you volunteered. We didn't ask you, although I welcomed it very much. You volunteered to bring forward an all-party Oireachtas motion in support of the Ballymurphy families. This was after you had met with them. And you told me that this motion would be produced in sufficient time for the families to be present here. And when some time went by and I raised this with you again because you hadn't delivered on that promise, you told me in July the 1st of last year, and I quote, that you are working on a comprehensive motion which will be discussed with Deputies Martin and Adams shortly. But near Harlow Rutherby, Taoisigh Ocean Amok. So while David Cameron can be blamed for failing to respond properly to this matter, in this instance, your commitment, given gratuitously and I think in good spirit, to bring in this all-party Oireachtas motion, where is it? And remember now what the families want. They want this to be of value. So they want to focus on condemnation of the inadequate investigative process followed by the RUC and the British authorities after the killings, and to welcome the decision in November 2011 by the Attorney General to direct the coroner to reopen the inquest. Remember the Stormont House Agreement? The British government tried to close down that process, and only because Sinn Féin stood firmly with the victims' families, they would have got away with this. But they're also seeking to have support for their proposal for a Hillsborough-style independent panel, which will examine all the documents relating to the context, the circumstance, and the aftermath of the death. So, Taoisigh Sin Ceist Amháin, when will the all-party motion be brought before the Dáil? I want to commend the decision by the government to support the move by the campaigners for the hooded men and to request the European Court of Human Rights to revise its judgment in this case. That was a right decision. The government was a bit dilatory at the beginning and a bit hesitant, but eventually you came to the right decision. Now, for the record, and this is all a matter off the record due to the diligent work done by the Pat Finucane Centre, these men were tortured over 7 days. Subsequently, or consequently, the British government lied to the Irish government of the day, to the lawyers acting for the hooded men, lied to the European Court of Human Rights, failed to inform the ECHR that this torture had been cleared by the then British Foreign Minister, Lord Carrington, and it also claimed that it had banned these 5 techniques and pledged in 1978 that it would not use these techniques in the north or anywhere else again. We know from Iraq that in 2003 the 5 techniques were used by every British battle group in Iraq. So I was looking to see what the current status of the case might be. And last week, you may not know this, but I thought it was interesting, the Pat Finucane Centre revealed that the interrogations were taped, that they're actually taped, that this was uncovered during research of the British National Archives, and the documents categorically state that the interrogation sessions of the men in Ballykelly, County Derry, were monitored and taped, and that there are 400 hours of these taped interrogations at the Joint School of Intelligence where British Army officers were trained in interrogation methods. And they have informed the Attorney General of this. That's the Pat Finucane Centre. So will the government seek access to these tapes? We also know from the US Senate report of torture that these techniques were used by the CIA, which has really serious implications for the government, given that you allowed US rendition flights to land in Shannon. And on the back of the Senate report, this state's now publicly identified as one of the 54 countries that collaborated in various ways with CIA renditions, detentions and interrogation. So have you raised this issue with the US government? And finally, the case of Pat Finucane. I know I've spoken for nearly as long as the Fianna Fáil leader, so I don't want to test your patience, Concholia, but this is a hugely important case. The fact is that the De Silva review revealed that 85% of the intelligence that the UDA used to target people for murder originated from British Army and police sources. That Pat Finucane's killing was cleared at the very highest level. That the issue was of collusion was discussed extensively at cabinet level. That ministers were clearly aware that agents were being run in this administrative practice. That the Director General of MI5 had actually raised it with the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. And De Silva said that this was a willful and abject failure by successive governments to allow this to happen. So I'm looking for an update. I do recall when I raised this with the British Prime Minister in your presence that you remained silent, that he ruled out any such inquiry, though he's obliged to go on to the Western Park Agreement to conduct such an inquiry. So I'm wondering, and I asked the Minister of Foreign Affairs this last week just, can we not use our diplomatic services? Can we not raise this issue with our friends at the UN, at the European Union, across the world, with the government in the USA, to have this case dealt with.
Thank you. Taoisigh.
Yeah, well, I take responsibility for not having had the all-party motion debated here up until now. As I said earlier in that reply, there have been some redrafting of what was being done because of the Stormont House Agreement. I'll bring it here. This is late February. Before the end of March, we'll have an opportunity to let the Ballymurphy people know that we'll have an all-party motion, if we can get agreement on it from the leaders and the whips. So I accept responsibility for not having put the motion to the Dáil before then. That's my fault. We considered the case of the hooded men because of all the information and the new information that had come to light, and have requested that the Court of Human Rights would look at this. Obviously, once you set out on that course, you would expect that all of the information relevant to that objective would be made available to the court, and therefore that would include the information contained on those tapes. Clearly, if the court is to make a decision in respect of changing the situation as far as the hooded men were concerned, well then obviously that stands as part of that evidence. The matter of Pat Finucane and his murder is one that we have been very clear about, and everybody here supports this. It had been raised by myself with the American authorities, with the British authorities. We have a very different view than the British government. It was part of the agreement that there would be a follow-through of the recommendations of Judge Corey, that there should be an inquiry into this, and we continue to stand by that. I'm wondering, in respect of the Stormont House Agreement, where the opportunity exists for all of the information to be given by an independent person to family members who look for information about the death of a family member or a loved one or whatever, whether that's going to impact on the situation where the British government made a decision that Mr. De Silva should go through the 1 million pages of paper in respect of the Finucane case, whether there's anything else there that would be applicable in the business of being able to draw down that kind of information and see whether there's anything relevant there or not. We continue to stand by our government position, which is a difference of opinion between this government and the British government in respect of having a full-scale public inquiry into the murder of Pat Finucane. And obviously, every chance I get, the matter is raised with the British government, and we'll continue to do the same with the American authorities, and I hope to have the opportunity to raise it with them when I get over there in the month of March. The one objective of Stormont was to put together a comprehensive framework for dealing with the legacy of the Troubles. Obviously, we made it clear in those discussions the difference of opinion we have with the British government here. So Minister Flanagan told the House that he'd raised it with Secretary of State Villiers at their meeting on the 11th of February. So be clear on this, Deputy Adams, we will work with and support the Finucane family in every way that we can as a government to follow through on their quest to have a full and transparent inquiry into the truth about the murder of Pat Finucane. I always take the view that if any government is serious about transparency and openness in respect of these matters, then whatever the information is should be made available. And I have to say that the British Prime Minister was very clear on these matters, because, as he said himself, he was only a young lad when many of them happened. And from his perspective, he said he would like to see the opportunity there for completion and conclusion for the families who lost loved ones in all these circumstances. So we discussed before in the House here the fact that you're not going to have the opportunity to have full-scale public inquiries into all of these several thousand tragic cases. But hopefully that the Stormont Agreement means what it says now, and that process can actually start. And I suppose the best evidence is proof of the provision of information that is currently off limits, where people have been killed or lost their lives. So in respect of Finucane, Ballymurphy, I'll come back to the House here before the end of March, and hopefully we can get agreement on an all-party motion and have it discussed with the Commissioner of the Concord in the House.
Deputy Higgins and